I had never killed anything before but fish, and I had hardly done that. I vividly remember a fishing trip with my best friend when I was 11, where I tried in vain to knock the tiny fish we just caught out, using driftwood on the sand. The fish just kept bouncing with every timid blow I dealt, flopping and gasping. I still cringe when it comes to the end of their lives. I've always been a pacifist, a sensitive hippie type. I was even a vegetarian for a couple of years. So it came as a shock when I was invited to participate in an epic Alaskan hunting trip with my boyfriend's family. We had 4 days to pack, buy licenses, and prepare. We were setting out to hunt off the almost entirely unpaved Denali Highway for 1 moose and 1 caribou. We were to use no motorized vehicles and expected to take up to 5 days. We got licenses and packed, and I contemplated what it was I was going to do. The idea of harvesting my own food from nature appealed to me, but I knew little about the actual process. We watched videos online of hunters dressing moose in the field and took notes on regulations and procedures. I felt as prepared as 4 days could get me and readied myself for the elements, the bears, and the gore. When we arrived at our intended takeoff point, I was nervous and excited. We had 3 mules, a wagon, and a few bicycles to get us 20-some miles into land inhabited only by wild animals and 1 old miner still living in the gold rush. I felt like we had been transported back into time. Riding on my mule, I felt connected to the earth in a way I never had before. I had lived in Alaska all my life, but I had never been hunting. I had no idea what I was in for, but was game enough to go along with the ride. I was shocked into the reality of the situation when we saw our first big caribou up ahead on the mountain ridge. I spotted him through the binoculars. "He looks just like Bambi's dad," I said. He was beautiful and majestic, standing up there watching his herd in the valley below. I was suddenly overcome with excitement. This was why we were here, to hunt this great, beautiful beast and to feed our families. I ran after Matt up the mountain, leaping over rocks and tundra mounds. We stopped only to catch our breath and whisper instructions to each other. We raced up and up as fast and quiet as we could until we were climbing with our bellies pressed against the shrinking tundra. Then he appeared, Bambi's father. More majestic and amazing than life, walked right across our line of sight. He was there above us. We had snuck right under him. Matt had the rifle, and I whispered quietly as a breeze, "Go for it." I watched through my binoculars as time stood still. The first few shots whizzed by him as Matt shot over his head, up the mountain, and to the side. The great caribou seemed unconcerned and stood his ground as bullets exploded the tundra around him. He slowly walked forward, giving us his broadside the whole time. Maybe he was giving himself to us like I had heard the natives talk about. Finally, just as he was almost out of range, a bullet struck, and he reared up onto his hind legs, looking as if he might leap right off the mountain. He stumbled, regained his footing, and slowly walked up and out of sight. As Matt followed him, time seemed to catch back up with itself, and I took a moment to observe my surroundings. I was standing/laying on my stomach on a 45-degree slope of tundra and rock, only about 1,000 feet from the top. My heart sank, and my palms began to sweat. I was alone, high above the valley, looking down at the wagon, which was no bigger than an ant now. Knees shaking, I climbed even higher, trying to see where Matt had followed the caribou. I found him in an even more precarious position than I had just left. The caribou had tumbled down the side of the ridge and now was only being held up by its antlers, which had caught in the soft earth. Shaking, I approached the even steeper hill that ended in a ravine. I steadied myself with my hand and sat down by it. I lifted my hand to see blood from the grass and wiped it off. I stared at the beast I had so admired minutes earlier. He looked smaller now, and more broken than majestic. I wanted to pet him and feel his fur, but I was also horrified to be in the presence of a large dead animal. After much internal debate, shock, and trying to pretend I was somewhere far, far away, I started helping to dress Bambi's dad. Slowly, he began to look less like a he and more like a big, meaty puzzle made of steaks and muscle. I thanked him, in my head, for his life, and thought about his herd and what it might mean for them that he is gone. I imagined that he had led a long, happy life being Bambi's father, and had taught him well. I imagined that the herd was so big they might not even notice. I thought about the caribou steaks my dad cooked me as a child, and I felt accomplished, if not a fuzzy and warm feeling from the experience. As I climbed down the mountain, legs heavy and noodle-like beneath me, I was proud. I had done something that I had set out to do. I worked harder than I had ever worked to find food for myself and my loved ones from the land I was born and raised in. I walked away and felt the earth beneath my feet, and I was a new person. I now knew I deserved the food I was going to eat. What we had done was honorable, and we had earned our privilege to sustain our lives with the life of another. I finally felt like I could call myself an Alaskan.